The galaxy had seen many conflicts, but none as strange as the one now unfolding on the planet Vexor. A distant world in the Andromeda system, Vexor was known for its desolate landscape, dark skies, and towering mountains. It was an ancient place, a world where warriors from across the stars gathered to test their strength and skill. The air buzzed with tension as crowds from different planets filled the massive coliseum built into the side of a mountain, eagerly awaiting the day's spectacle. At the center of this arena stood a figure unlike any other, a towering alien warrior. She was known as Varzal, a member of the Zorathian species, whose physical prowess and combat abilities were legendary. Her people had long ruled the stars through their strength, and their warriors were feared across the galaxy. Varzal's reputation preceded her wherever she went. She had fought and won countless battles, never once being defeated in one-on-one combat. The Zorathians believed that strength was the key to ruling, and Varzal embodied this philosophy more than anyone. Today, however, something had changed. Varzal had issued a challenge. She stood tall in the middle of the Colosseum, her red armor gleaming under the dim light of the twin suns. Her long, dark hair flowed in the wind, and her intense eyes scanned the crowd. Her people stood proudly behind her, cheering her on, while spectators from other worlds waited in suspense. "I challenge any human to a duel," Varzal's voice rang out, booming across the arena, amplified by the sound system. "If any human dares face me, I will prove the superiority of my species once and for all." The crowd fell into a stunned silence. Humans? The idea of a human challenging Varzal, let alone winning, was absurd. No human had ever dared to face one of the Zorathians in battle. They were simply too weak, too fragile in comparison to the towering warriors of the galaxy's other races. The Zorathians had long viewed humanity as nothing more than a primitive species, not worthy of their attention. But Varzal was not concerned with the views of others. She was confident, overconfident even, that no human could stand a chance against her. She had never been defeated, and she was certain that no one, not even the strongest human, could change that. As her challenge echoed through the arena, a ripple of unease passed through the human spectators. They had heard the stories of Varzal, of her brutality in battle and her unwavering confidence. Many of them had come to Vexor hoping to witness a great fight, but no one had expected it to be a human versus the Zorathian warrior. Then, from the crowd, a voice broke the silence. "I'll do it." The crowd turned to see a young human soldier step forward, his face determined. His name was Captain Liam Voss, a soldier from Earth who had been stationed on Vexor as part of an intergalactic peacekeeping mission. He had seen many battles, fought against alien forces in distant stars, but none like this. He wasn't the strongest warrior, nor the biggest, but he had something else, a sharp mind and a deep sense of duty. His friends and comrades had always called him the strategist, for he never relied on brute force alone. Instead, he studied his enemies, learning their strengths and weaknesses, using their flaws to his advantage. Liam knew that this would not be an easy fight. He had heard the stories of Varzal and knew that the Zorathian warrior was more than just a skilled fighter. She was a living legend, someone who had never known defeat. But Liam also knew something that many others didn't. Humanity had a resilience that no one else in the galaxy could match. No matter how impossible the odds, humans never gave up. They found a way to survive. Varzal raised an eyebrow as she looked at Liam. "You? A human?" she asked, her voice laced with disbelief. "You are not even worth my time, but since you volunteered, I'll show you what true strength looks like." Liam didn't flinch. He took a step forward, his eyes locked on Varzal's, unwavering. He had heard the rumors, seen the footage of her victories, and understood just how dangerous she was. But he wasn't here to back down. "I don't back down from a challenge." Liam replied calmly. "I'll fight you, but I won't fight fair. I'm not here to prove anything to anyone but myself." The alien warrior laughed, a deep, mocking sound that echoed across the arena. "You will regret this," she warned, as the crowd gasped in anticipation. As the challenge was set, the atmosphere in the Colosseum grew thick with tension. Onlookers from across the galaxy watched from their home planets, waiting to see the outcome of the duel between the human and the alien warrior. Some believed it would be over quickly, a simple show of Zorathian power. Others whispered that this could be the start of something much larger, something that could change the future of the galaxy. Liam, for his part, wasn't concerned with the crowd's expectations. He wasn't here for glory or fame. He was here to survive, and perhaps to prove something to himself. Back in the human camp, his fellow soldiers watched in silence. "Liam's got guts, I'll give him that," one of them muttered. "But against someone like her, it's suicide." Another soldier nodded. "Yeah, but he's different. He might just have a trick up his sleeve." Liam's closest friend, Sergeant Kate Turner, stood off to the side, her arms crossed. She watched him with a mix of concern and pride. "He's not stupid," she said quietly. "He knows he can't outfight her, but maybe he's got something else in mind." The duel was about to begin, and the entire galaxy waited, with bated breath. Varzal and Liam stood facing each other on the arena floor, the lights dimming to add to the tension. The air was heavy with anticipation, the moment of truth upon them. For all her size, strength, and skill, Varzal knew little of what to expect from this human. She had fought creatures from all corners of the galaxy, but never one quite like this. She assumed that this human, like all the others, would fall easily before her superior power. But what Varzal didn't know was that the human soldier had trained for this day his entire life, not in the way she had, by wielding strength and power, but in the quiet ways that made the mind sharper than any blade. And so, with a single motion, the duel began. The fate of the galaxy, it seemed, rested in the hands of a human soldier who was about to show the alien warrior just what humanity was capable of. The morning sun rose over the planet Vexor, casting long shadows across the rocky landscape. The planet, known for its harsh conditions, was the perfect place for warriors to hone their skills. Soldiers from various worlds trained here, pushing their limits day after day. But today the atmosphere was different. Today, a human soldier would face a challenge unlike any other. Captain Liam Voss stood at the edge of the training ground, his mind focused. His muscles ached from the long hours of practice, but he couldn't afford to stop. The duel with Varzal was fast approaching, and he needed to be ready. He knew that his physical strength could never match that of the Zorathian warrior. But he had something else, his mind. He was a strategist, and that, he hoped, would be enough to give him the edge. Liam's eyes scanned the training area. His fellow soldiers were practicing hand-to-hand combat, their movements fluid and powerful. But Liam wasn't interested in strength alone. He had always believed that brains were just as important as brawn, and in this fight, it was going to be his greatest weapon. He needed to outsmart Varzal, not overpower her. He stepped forward and began his drills. His movements were precise and calculated, each step designed to mimic the fluidity of battle. He practiced footwork, dodging, and counterattacking, all the while imagining himself facing Varzal's overwhelming strength. The Zorathian warrior would come at him with power, but Liam knew that if he could make her miss just once, he could turn the tide of the battle. Liam's mind raced as he visualized the duel. He had seen videos of Varzal in action. Her strength was unmatched, her reflexes lightning fast. But what the videos didn't show was her pride, her arrogance. Liam knew that she would underestimate him. She would see him as nothing more than a human, fragile and weak. He would use that to his advantage. As he continued his training, Liam's thoughts drifted to the words of his mentor, Sergeant Kate Turner. Kate was a seasoned warrior with years of experience in combat. She had seen countless battles and had always been there to guide Liam through his training. But this time, there was a different kind of tension between them. She had never been so concerned about a mission before. "Liam," Kate had said the night before, her voice serious, "you're a good soldier. You've got the mind for strategy, and you know how to stay calm under pressure, but Varzal is no ordinary opponent. She's the strongest warrior in the galaxy, and she won't hesitate to crush you if you make even the slightest mistake." Liam had nodded, acknowledging the gravity of the situation. "I know, Kate, but I'm not going into this fight without a plan. I've studied her tactics. I know how she fights, and I'm going to use that against her." Kate had looked at him, her eyes filled with concern. "Just be careful. She'll play mind games with you. Don't let her get into your head." Liam hadn't said it, but he knew what Kate was really worried about. She was worried about him getting hurt, about him not coming back, but Liam was determined. He had made it this far by never backing down from a challenge, and he wasn't going to start now. As the days passed, Liam's training grew more intense. He spent hours each day practicing different techniques, preparing for every possible scenario. He knew that Varzal would be relentless. She wouldn't stop until she had defeated him, and he had to be ready for that. He focused on his agility, knowing that it was his only chance to evade her brutal attacks. He practiced dodging strikes, using the momentum of her blows against her. He visualized every move she might make, preparing himself mentally and physically for the fight of his life. But it wasn't just physical training that he needed. He also had to prepare himself mentally. He had to learn how to stay calm when the pressure was at its highest. He couldn't let fear control him. The human soldier had seen battle before, but never like this. This was no ordinary mission. This was a fight for survival. One evening, after another grueling training session, Liam sat alone in his quarters, reflecting on everything that had led him here. He had always been a soldier, trained to fight for his country, for his people. But this was different. Varzal wasn't just an enemy. She represented everything that humanity had always struggled against, the belief that they were weak, insignificant in the eyes of the galaxy. But Liam wasn't going to let that be the story of humanity. He wasn't going to let one alien warrior define what humanity could or couldn't do. "Come on, Voss," he muttered to himself. "You've faced worse odds before. You can do this." Suddenly, the door to his quarters slid open, and Sergeant Kate Turner walked in, her face set in a determined expression. She had always been a tough leader, but there was something different in her eyes today, a mixture of pride and worry. "How's the training going?" she asked, her voice steady. Liam looked up, wiping the sweat from his brow. "It's going well. I'm making progress." Kate raised an eyebrow. "Making progress?" She walked over to where Liam was sitting and gave him a pointed look. "Liam, you're not just going to make progress. You're going to need to be perfect. This isn't just any fight. This is a duel with the greatest warrior in the galaxy. You can't afford to mess up." Liam stood up, straightening his posture. "I know. I'm ready." Kate studied him for a moment, her eyes narrowing. "Are you sure? Because if you're not, you'll get yourself killed out there." Liam didn't flinch. "I'm ready, Kate. I've trained my whole life for this moment. I won't let humanity down." Kate nodded slowly, then placed a hand on his shoulder. "I'm proud of you, Liam. Just promise me one thing." "What's that?" Liam asked, meeting her gaze. "Don't do anything stupid." Liam gave a small smile. "I won't. I've got a plan." Kate gave a tight smile, then turned to leave. "Good luck. You're going to need it." The next morning, Liam arrived at the training grounds once again. His body was sore from the previous day's workout, but he pushed through the pain. He couldn't afford to rest. Today was the day he would perfect his technique, Today was the day he would take one final step toward preparing for the duel. As Liam trained, he thought about his plan. It wasn't a plan to defeat Varzal through strength. That would be impossible. Instead, it was a plan to outsmart her, to use her pride and arrogance against her. He knew she would underestimate him. He knew she would expect him to fight like a typical human, weak and slow. But Liam wasn't like other humans. He wasn't just a soldier. He was a strategist, and he would use that to his advantage. His training became more focused as the hours passed. He practiced dodging, evading, and counterattacking. He visualized the fight over and over in his mind, going through every possible scenario. He couldn't afford to leave anything to chance. The stakes were too high. If he failed, humanity would be seen as nothing more than an inferior race in the eyes of the galaxy. But if he succeeded, if he could somehow find a way to win, then it would prove something far more important. It would show the galaxy that humans weren't weak, that they weren't something to be overlooked. It would show them that no matter the odds, humanity would always rise to the challenge. As the day of the duel approached, Liam's resolve only grew stronger. He would do whatever it took to win, not for glory, not for fame, but for humanity's future. The day of the duel had arrived. The twin suns of Vexor hung high in the sky, casting a golden glow across the arena. The Colosseum, built into the side of a mountain, was packed with spectators from across the galaxy. It was a place where warriors had tested their strength for centuries. But today, the crowd buzzed with excitement like never before. The fate of a human soldier was about to be decided, and the challenger was none other than the legendary Zorathian warrior, Varzal. The arena was alive with noise, shouts of encouragement, whispers of disbelief, and the unmistakable hum of anticipation. Liam Voss stood at the entrance of the arena, his heart pounding in his chest. The cold air of the morning did little to calm his nerves, but he forced himself to stay calm. His training had prepared him for this moment. He had spent countless hours imagining the fight, running through every possible scenario in his mind. He had a plan, and now he had to see it through. His eyes scanned the arena as he walked toward the center. There, standing tall and proud, was Varzal, her crimson armor gleaming in the sunlight. Her expression was one of complete confidence, her shoulders squared and her hands resting easily on the hilt of her weapon. She looked every bit the warrior that her reputation had made her. Her gaze locked onto Liam as he approached, her eyes filled with disdain and amusement. "So, the human has arrived," Varzal's voice echoed across the arena. "I hope you're ready for a lesson in true strength." Liam didn't flinch. He had prepared himself for her words. He had known she would try to intimidate him, but he wasn't here to play her game. He was here to survive. "I'm not here to learn from you," Liam replied, his voice steady. "I'm here to show you what humanity can do." Varzal raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "You think you can beat me? How charming," the crowd murmured, some in disbelief, others in anticipation. No one expected the human to stand a chance against a warrior of Varzal's caliber, but Liam was not about to back down. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for every human who had ever been underestimated, for every soldier who had been told they weren't strong enough. The announcer's voice boomed over the loudspeakers, signaling the start of the duel. "The duel begins now. The first to be defeated will be declared the loser. There are no rules. May the strongest fighter win." Liam stood at the center of the arena, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the weight of every eye on him, every alien watching from the stands, waiting for him to fail. But he refused to let that fear control him. He had trained for this. He had prepared for this. And now it was time to face Varzal, the strongest warrior in the galaxy. Varzal moved first, her powerful legs propelling her forward with a speed that surprised Liam. Her massive sword gleamed in the sunlight as she swung it toward him with deadly precision. The force of her strike was enough to send a shock wave through the air. Liam barely had time to react. He twisted his body to the side, just narrowly avoiding the blow. The sword sliced through the air where he had been standing only a moment before, and the ground beneath him cracked with the force of her strike. Liam's mind raced. He had expected her strength, but the sheer power behind her swings was overwhelming. If he didn't keep moving, he would be crushed. He had to use his speed, his agility, and his wits to stay one step ahead. He darted to the left, narrowly avoiding. Another swing. The arena floor beneath him was slick with dust and sand, making every step a potential misstep. But he didn't let that distract him. He had to stay focused on Varzal, on her every movement, on every swing of her weapon. He could feel the adrenaline pumping through his veins, heightening his senses. Every muscle in his body screamed for him to run, to escape. But he wouldn't. He wasn't a coward. He was a soldier, and soldiers didn't run from a fight. Varzal's eyes narrowed as she watched him dance around her strikes. She had expected the human to be slow, to fall easily under her blows. But he was fast, faster than she had anticipated, and his movements were precise, calculated. It was as though he wasn't just dodging her attacks, but reading them. She wasn't used to opponents who could predict her moves. With a roar of frustration, Varzal launched herself at him again, this time with a series of rapid strikes, each one faster than the last. She was trying to overwhelm him, to catch him off guard. But Liam had seen this move before. He knew it was coming. He ducked under the first strike, then pivoted to the side to avoid the second. As the third strike came down, he grabbed the edge of her sword with both hands, using her momentum to twist it from her grip. Varzal staggered back, surprised. She had never fought an opponent who could turn her own strength against her. She quickly regained her balance, glaring at Liam. "You're more resourceful than I expected," she hissed. Liam didn't respond. He didn't have time for words. Instead, he moved in quickly, using the opening he had created. He kicked her in the knee, forcing her to stumble back. It wasn't a devastating blow, but it was enough to make her hesitate for a split second. That split second was all Liam needed. He lunged forward, throwing a series of quick jabs aimed at her pressure points. He knew he couldn't overpower her, but he could wear her down. If he could find a way to disrupt her rhythm, to throw her off balance, he might just have a chance. Varzal grunted in frustration as Liam's strikes landed, each one hitting its mark. She swung her fists wildly in an attempt to knock him away, but he was too fast, too elusive. Her anger grew, and with it, her desperation. She could feel her strength waning as the battle dragged on. The crowd was on the edge of their seats, some of them cheering for the alien warrior, others shocked by the human soldier's resilience. The tension in the air was palpable. It wasn't just a fight anymore. It was a test of wills. Liam wasn't just fighting for his own survival. He was fighting for humanity's place in the galaxy. Varzal's attacks grew more erratic, her pride fueling her rage. She was determined to crush this human, to prove that no one, no matter how clever, could stand against her power. But the more she pushed, the more she left herself open. Liam's strategy was working. She was losing control. He ducked under another wild strike and launched himself at her once more. This time, instead of a series of jabs, he went for her legs, aiming to take her down. His foot connected with her knee and she buckled slightly. He pressed the advantage, quickly moving behind her and grabbing her arms. Varzal twisted violently, trying to break free from his grip, but Liam held fast. He used every ounce of his training to keep her restrained. This was the moment he had been waiting for. If he could just hold her long enough, if he could just tire her out. But Varzal wasn't going down without a fight. With a powerful roar, she slammed her head back into Liam's face. He felt the impact, the sharp pain spreading through his skull. He stumbled backward, disoriented. The world around him blurred for a moment, and he barely had time to steady himself before Varzal surged forward again, her eyes blazing with fury. Liam's head throbbed from the impact of Varzal's headbutt. He blinked rapidly, trying to clear the stars from his vision. His mind raced, struggling to keep up with the fast pace of the duel. Varzal was already recovering from the momentary weakness he had forced upon her, and now she was closing in, her eyes filled with fury. She swung again, but this time Liam was ready. He sidestepped her strike, moving with a speed that seemed impossible for someone of his size. The crowd gasped in awe as he avoided her blow by mere inches. His training in agility and quick thinking was paying off. He had learned to use his smaller frame and speed to his advantage, but it wasn't going to be enough if he kept playing defense. He had to turn the tide in his favor. He had to find a way to counterattack. As Varzal lunged at him, Liam saw his opportunity. Instead of retreating, he stepped into her swing, using his own body weight to direct her sword off course. The blade clanged loudly against the arena floor as Varzal lost her grip momentarily. She was caught off guard, and Liam quickly grabbed a loose piece of debris lying on the ground, a rock, large enough to act as a shield, but light enough to carry. With a sharp motion, Liam threw the rock directly at her face, distracting her. It wasn't a deadly move, but it forced her to block, giving him the precious seconds he needed to regain his stance. Varzal staggered back, rubbing her forehead, her eyes narrowing at him with growing irritation. "You think you can use rocks against me?" she sneered, her voice dripping with contempt. Liam didn't answer. He was too focused on his next move. His mind spun through every tactic he had ever learned, his military training, his experiences in the field, his encounters with enemies far more dangerous than himself. Varzal had strength, but Liam had something more, his intelligence, and right now it was his greatest weapon. With a sudden burst of energy, Liam dashed toward a small outcrop at the side of the arena. The rocky surface gave him a slight elevation, but more importantly, it allowed him to position himself just out of Varzal's direct line of sight. His heart was pounding in his chest, but he knew he couldn't afford to stop. Varzal, now realizing that Liam wasn't just going to stand and fight in the traditional sense, began scanning the arena more carefully. She was used to opponents who charged straight at her, hoping to overpower her with brute strength. But this human, he was different. He was unpredictable, and his movements were calculated, precise. Every time she tried to strike, he found a way to avoid or deflect her attacks. "You're quick, human," she muttered under her breath, more to herself than to him. "But that won't save you." Liam heard her words but didn't respond. Instead, he reached into his utility belt and pulled out a small device. It was nothing fancy, just a simple communication jammer. He had prepared for every possible scenario, and he knew that the arena's surveillance system could easily interfere with the fight. If Varzal had any backup from her people or the arena officials, he couldn't let that happen. With a quick push of a button, the jammer activated, cutting off any signal that might come from outside the arena. Varzal immediately sensed something was wrong. She paused, her brow furrowing as she looked around. "Clever," she said, her tone still mocking. "But you won't be able to hide from me forever." Liam didn't waste time. He knew he had only moments before Varzal regained her focus. He quickly darted to the other side of the arena, climbing up a rocky ledge that offered a better vantage point. He was now out of reach of Varzal's sword, and he used this moment to catch his breath. His plan was working, but he couldn't relax. This fight was far from over. From his new position, Liam could see the entire arena. Varzal's massive form stood in the center, pacing, trying to locate him. She was fast, but Liam had the advantage of surprise. And that was the key. Varzal was stronger, yes, but she wasn't used to being outmaneuvered, outsmarted. The human soldier took a deep breath and closed his eyes, focusing. He remembered the advice from his mentor, Kate Turner. Always stay one step ahead, predict their next move, use what they don't expect. With that thought in mind, Liam formulated a new strategy. He would no longer try to match her head-on. It was clear that her raw power was too much for him to overcome. Instead, he would continue to confuse and frustrate her, tire her out. He had to keep making her miss. Every failed strike would weaken her resolve, and that was when he would strike. He crouched low to the ground, making himself a smaller target, then moved quietly to another part of the arena. This time, he was going to bait her. His heart raced as he placed himself near an old, broken pillar that was lodged in the ground. The pillar wasn't stable, and Liam knew he could use it to his advantage. Varzal's eyes scanned the arena once again, and Liam saw his chance. She moved toward him, thinking he was hiding behind the pillar, but she was wrong. Liam had already anticipated her movements. As she approached, Liam slid quietly behind her, his steps light and careful. Just as Varzal reached the pillar, Liam leapt into action. He lunged forward, using his momentum to grab her from behind, pulling her off balance. Varzal's massive form staggered, and for the first time in the duel, she was vulnerable. She twisted violently, trying to break free, but Liam held fast. It wasn't strength that kept him holding on. It was his speed, his ability to read her moves, and his precise timing. He pressed his advantage, using every ounce of his training to keep her off balance. With a quick strike to the back of her knee, he sent her crashing to the ground. It wasn't a fatal blow, but it was enough to send a message. Varzal growled in frustration, struggling to rise. "You think you can defeat me with tricks?" Liam didn't respond. He was too focused on the fight. He had learned something important in that brief moment. The alien warrior was becoming more frustrated. The stronger she got, the more desperate she became to end this quickly. And desperation made people sloppy. "I don't need tricks," Liam finally replied, his voice calm but firm. "I just need to survive." As he spoke, he moved quickly, always staying just out of her reach. He knew that Varzal wasn't used to fighting like this, using misdirection, avoiding her strengths, and forcing her to chase him. The longer he kept it up, the more it would wear her down. And with each passing moment, Liam's confidence grew. He had proven he could stay alive, but now he had to prove he could finish this. Varzal, now panting with exertion, squared herself again, her eyes filled with rage. "You are a fool," she hissed, her voice low and threatening. "You will regret this." Liam didn't flinch. He had no intention of regretting anything. He had a plan, and it was working. He just needed one more push. The next move, he knew, would decide it all. Liam's breath came in short, ragged gasps as he circled the arena, his eyes never leaving Varzal. The Zarathian warrior was breathing heavily now, her movements slower, more deliberate. She was beginning to tire. For the first time since the duel began, Liam saw a crack in her confidence. It was subtle, just a brief hesitation after a swing, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. But to Liam, it was everything. He had managed to chip away at her pride, and now he had a chance to win. Varzal's anger was starting to boil over, and it was showing in her movements. Instead of the calm, calculated strikes she had used earlier, her attacks had become wild, almost reckless. She swung her massive sword with everything she had, her eyes fixed on him with a burning intensity, but each strike was missing by inches. Liam's agility, honed by years of training, kept him just out of her reach. He was no longer just evading her. He was controlling the pace of the fight. The crowd was on the edge of their seats, watching the duel unfold with bated breath. There was a murmur of disbelief as the human soldier continued to evade the great warrior. This wasn't supposed to happen. No one had ever lasted this long against a Zorathian. Yet here Liam was, holding his ground. Varzal's frustration grew with every missed strike. She was used to opponents falling before her, not dodging and weaving with such skill. She had underestimated the human soldier from the very beginning. thinking his size and strength would be his only weaknesses. But it was his mind that was making the difference, and that more than anything infuriated her. "You're a fool, human!" Varzal shouted, her voice echoing across the arena. "You can run, you can hide, but you will never defeat me!" Liam didn't respond. He didn't need to. He was focused on the fight, on the rhythm of the battle. His muscles ached, his body screamed for rest, but he couldn't stop. Not now. Not when victory was within his grasp. Varzal swung her sword. Again, and this time, Liam saw his chance. He wasn't going to dodge this one. He knew it was coming, and he had already planned his move. As her sword came down with a roar, he twisted to the side, just enough to avoid the blade's edge. In the same motion, he reached out and grabbed the sword's hilt with both hands. For a moment, they were locked in a fierce struggle, with Liam holding onto the sword while Varzal tried to free it from his grip. The Zarathian warrior's strength was unmatched, but Liam had leverage. He used his smaller frame to twist the weapon, pulling it away from her. Varzal snarled, her face twisted in fury, but she couldn't break free. Then, with a sudden, sharp movement, Liam twisted the sword out of her hands. It flew across the arena, landing in the dust several yards away. For a moment, both of them stood there, breathing heavily, staring at each other. Liam's eyes were focused and determined, while Varzal's were filled with disbelief. The crowd fell silent. It was a moment of shock. No one had expected this. A human soldier, with no experience in direct combat against such a powerful foe, had disarmed the most feared warrior in the galaxy. Varzal's gaze flickered to the sword, and then back to Liam. Her pride had been shattered. She was a warrior, a conqueror. Yet here she was, standing before a human who had managed to take her weapon away. Her eyes burned with anger, but beneath it, there was a flicker of something else. Respect. "You're not like the others," she said, her voice quieter now, almost thoughtful. Liam didn't reply. He was still catching his breath, still, reeling from the shock of what had just happened. But he knew he couldn't let his guard down. Varzal was dangerous, even without her sword, and he had no intention of giving her a chance to recover. Instead of attacking, Liam took a step back. He wanted her to think. He wanted her to question her next move. He wanted her to feel the weight of the decision that lay before her. "Your strength is unmatched," Liam said finally, his voice steady. "But you don't understand what it means to fight for something greater than yourself." Varzal's eyes narrowed, and she took a step forward, fists clenched at her sides. "What do you know of fighting for anything but your own survival?" she spat. Liam met her gaze, his expression unwavering. "I'm fighting for humanity. I'm fighting for the future of our species. We may not be the strongest, but we have something that you'll never understand. We fight for each other." The words hung in the air for a moment, and for the first time in the fight, Varzal seemed to pause. She had always fought for herself, for her people, for power. But the human soldier in front of her was different. He wasn't fighting for glory or for personal gain. He was fighting because he believed in something bigger than himself, and that thought lingered in her mind, making her question everything she had known about strength. Liam didn't wait for her to respond. He knew the moment of hesitation wouldn't last long. He moved quickly, his body already shifting into position. He had one chance, and he wasn't going to waste it. He dove toward her, not to strike, but to close the distance between them. His hands reached out, not for her body, but for her throat. He wasn't trying to choke her. He was trying to destabilize her, to force her to make a choice, to put her in a position where she had to decide between fighting with everything she had left or admitting that she had met her match. Varzal reacted instantly, her hands shooting up to grab his wrists. The two of them struggled, their bodies locked in a fierce clash of wills. The strength in Varzal's arms was immense, but Liam didn't give up. He fought with every ounce of energy he had left, knowing that this was his only chance to end the duel. For a moment, it seemed like the battle was at a standstill. Varzal's grip was unyielding, and Liam's strength was starting to wane. But then, just as his vision began to blur with exhaustion, he felt something shift. Varzal's stance wavered, her footing unsteady. It was a small shift, but it was enough. With one final surge of energy, Liam pushed with everything he had, throwing his weight against her. She stumbled back, losing her balance, and in that instant, Liam took the upper hand. He twisted her arm behind her back, forcing her to the ground. The crowd erupted into cheers. They had never seen anything like this. A human had done the impossible. He had beaten the greatest warrior in the galaxy, not through brute strength, but through skill, strategy, and sheer determination. Varzal lay on the ground, her chest heaving with exhaustion. She had never known defeat like this. She had underestimated the human from the very beginning, and now, as she looked up at him, she realized that she had made a grave mistake. "You've won," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "You're stronger than I thought." Liam stood above her, panting, his body trembling with the effort. But there was no victory dance, no celebration. He was simply relieved that the fight was over. And as he looked down at the alien warrior, he realized that he had done more than win a duel. He had proven that humanity was not to be underestimated. The arena was silent. It had never been this quiet before. The roar of the crowd had died down to nothing, replaced by the sound of heavy breathing, the faint scrape of boots against the dusty ground. The tension was so thick in the air that it felt almost tangible, a heavy weight pressing down on everyone in the Colosseum. For the first time since the duel began, Varzal was not moving. She lay on the ground, her body flat against the cold stone, her chest rising and falling with each deep breath. Her face, usually filled with pride and confidence, now showed something entirely different, something Liam had never expected to see in such a fierce warrior. It was confusion. It was disbelief. Varzal, the undefeated champion of the Zorathian Empire, had been bested by a human. Liam stood over her, his body trembling with exhaustion. His arms ached, his legs felt like they could give way at any moment. But he didn't take his eyes off Varzal. He had won. But the victory didn't feel like what he had imagined. The adrenaline was wearing off, and now, all he could focus on was the alien warrior lying before him, defeated, but not broken. He hadn't expected to see her like this, vulnerable, unsure, almost human. Varzal's eyes locked with his. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The sounds of the crowd faded into the background as though time itself had slowed. The only thing Liam could hear was his own heartbeat, pounding in his ears. "You." Varzal's voice was low, almost lost beneath the weight of her own thoughts. How did you do it?" Liam took a deep breath, feeling the sweat drip down his face, stinging in his eyes. His muscles screamed in protest, but he remained standing, his posture rigid, his hands clenched at his sides. "I used my mind," he replied simply, his voice steady despite the exhaustion. "You rely on strength, but strength isn't everything. Sometimes the fight is won by outthinking your opponent, by using what they least expect." Varzal's gaze flickered, and she slowly pushed herself up, her face still twisted in disbelief. She had always been taught that power was the key to victory. It was the Zorathian way, strength, speed, and brutality. But this human, this soldier, had shown her that there was more to battle than that. There was more to fighting than simply overpowering your enemy. "You're nothing like the others," she muttered under her breath, as if she were still trying to make sense of what had just happened. You fought differently. I couldn't understand it. Every time I tried to strike, you were already one step ahead." Liam didn't say anything, But he knew that what Varzal was experiencing was the same realization that he had had when he first accepted the challenge. It wasn't enough to be fast or strong. It wasn't even enough to have an advantage in numbers. What truly mattered in a battle was adaptability, the ability to learn, to adjust, and to use every tool at your disposal. Varzal looked up at him, her expression changing from disbelief to something else, something almost respectful. She had faced countless opponents, had crushed armies with ease, but this human soldier, with his quick thinking and unpredictable tactics, had bested her in a way she never thought possible. For the first time in her life, Varzal felt something she had never experienced in battle: humility. The kind of humility that came from being defeated not by strength, but by strategy. "I underestimated you," she said, her voice steady but filled with a note of respect. "And in doing so, I learned something valuable." Liam took a step back, allowing her space to rise. He wasn't here to gloat. He wasn't here to prove that humanity was superior. This was about survival, about showing the galaxy that there was more to humanity than what others had seen. It was about demonstrating that humans, despite their flaws and weaknesses, were capable of greatness when they worked together and used their minds. "You don't have to be the strongest to win a fight," Liam said softly. "You just have to be the smartest." Varzal finally stood up, brushing herself off. She didn't look at him with the same disdain she had earlier, but with something closer to admiration. There was no shame in defeat, not when it had been earned in such a way. And as she looked at the human soldier before her, she knew that this moment, this battle, would not just be a turning point for her, but for both of them. Liam's eyes never left her. He had won, but he wasn't celebrating. He had expected something else, something more dramatic, something that would fill him with pride. But all he felt was a quiet satisfaction. He had done it for humanity, to show that they were not as helpless as the galaxy believed them to be. But now, standing in front of the alien warrior, he realized that the victory was not just his, it was theirs. "Now what?" Liam asked, his voice calm but filled with curiosity. He had fought hard to get here, but he had no idea what came next. He wasn't the one who was supposed to decide the fate of the galaxy. He wasn't the one who was supposed to decide what happened to Varzal. The alien warrior, once the unstoppable force, now looked at him with a different expression. One of thoughtfulness. One of reflection. "I don't know," Varzal replied, her voice quieter now. "I've never faced a situation like this before. I've never been forced to question my own beliefs. But you've made me see things differently." Liam nodded slowly, understanding more than she knew. He hadn't just won a fight today. He had changed something deep inside her. Maybe not right away, but in time, this moment would echo through her people, and perhaps through the entire galaxy. If a human could defeat a Zorathian warrior, what else was possible? Varzal's gaze softened slightly as she spoke again, her words weighed with a new sense of respect. "I came here to prove the superiority of my people, but you—" She paused, looking up at him. "You've proven something much greater." Liam didn't know how to respond to that. He wasn't interested in proving anything to anyone. He had only fought to survive, to protect those he cared about. But hearing her words, he realized that this moment was more significant than he had ever anticipated. "Maybe we're not so different after all," Liam said, his voice soft but strong. "Maybe we both fight for something bigger than ourselves." Varzal didn't answer immediately. She stood there, staring at him, as though weighing her next words carefully. Finally, after a long pause, she spoke. "I think I've been wrong," she said slowly, her voice tinged with an unexpected warmth. "I've always believed that strength was the key to everything. But you've shown me that there's more to it. Maybe Maybe there's more to humanity than I've been led to believe. Liam gave a small, understanding smile. Maybe there's more to all of us than we realize. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of the battle was still fresh in the air, but there was something different now, something that neither of them could ignore. The world around them had shifted, and they both knew that this moment, this unexpected encounter, would change them forever. The crowd, having watched in stunned silence, began to cheer, slowly at first, but growing louder with every passing second. Liam's heart raced, but this time the cheers didn't feel like a celebration of his victory. They felt like an acknowledgement of something far greater, the beginning of change. Varzal turned to face the crowd, and for the first time, she stood tall, not as a conqueror, but as a warrior who had learned something new. The Zorathian people, once so certain of their dominance, had witnessed a human soldier prove that strength was not the only path to victory. The galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. The sounds of the cheering crowd began to fade into the background as Liam stood in the arena, facing Varzal. The alien warrior had risen to her feet, her stance no longer one of aggression, but one of contemplation. She stood tall, her once imposing presence now marked by a quiet respect for the human soldier in front of her. She glanced at the crowd, who were still roaring with excitement, but her eyes remained fixed on Liam. The battle was over. The duel that had started with arrogance and pride had ended in an unexpected victory, but now something else hung in the air. It wasn't just about strength or survival anymore. Something deeper had shifted. The realization was undeniable. Humanity wasn't weak. It wasn't just about physical power or overwhelming force. It was about willpower, intelligence, and the drive to do what seemed impossible. Varzal stood still, processing the events in her mind. She had faced countless enemies in her lifetime, creatures with far more strength, speed, and skill than any human. But this human, Liam Voss, had fought differently. He had outwitted her, outlasted her, and proven that sometimes the greatest weapon wasn't brute strength, but the will to think and act when it mattered most. She had come to this arena to prove that her people, the Zorathians, were the strongest in the galaxy, that no species, no matter how advanced, could stand against them. And yet, here she was, defeated, not by strength, but by strategy. Liam, still standing, wiped the sweat from his brow. His heart was still pounding from the fight, but he was no longer focused on the victory. The arena was alive with the noise of the crowd, but his thoughts were elsewhere. This moment wasn't about him. It was about what came next. What did the galaxy learn from this battle? What did Varzal learn? Slowly, Varzal stepped toward him, her eyes never leaving his. Her every movement was measured, no longer aggressive, but calm. The aura of superiority that had once surrounded her seemed to have vanished. Now, there was something different in her expression. Something like curiosity. She had been humbled, but it wasn't in defeat. It was in the realization that there was more to strength than she had believed. The universe wasn't just about dominance and power. It was about growth and understanding. "You've shown me something, human," Varzal said, her voice calm but filled with a new depth. "I came here to destroy you, to prove that your kind was nothing more than fragile creatures. But now I see that you are more than that. You are resilient, resourceful, and for that, I respect you." Liam didn't know what to say. He had expected her to be angry, to refuse to accept the outcome, but instead, she was acknowledging him in a way that made the victory feel different. It wasn't just about her defeat. It was about her willingness to see beyond her own beliefs, beyond the power she had always relied on. "I don't need your respect," Liam said, his voice steady. "I don't fight for respect. I fight for my people. I fight for a future where we don't have to bow to anyone." where we can stand on our own 2 feet. Varzal nodded slowly, as though understanding something deeper now. And that is why you won, she replied, because you fight for something greater than yourself. I have spent my life fighting for glory, for conquest. But you fight for your people. That is the difference. Liam took a step forward, his eyes meeting hers. He could see the change in her. There was no longer the same arrogance in her gaze. Instead, there was a quiet respect, the recognition of a worthy opponent. She had been humbled, not just by the fight, but by the realization that there was more to life than strength and conquest. I didn't expect this, Liam said, a slight smile tugging at the corner of his lips. I thought you would be angry, but now I see you've learned something too. Varzal's expression softened. I have learned that there is more to strength than I ever imagined, and I have learned that humanity is not to be underestimated. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The arena around them was still filled with the sounds of cheering, but for Liam and Varzal, everything seemed to fade away. There was a quiet understanding between them, a recognition of the mutual respect that had been forged in the heat of battle. Then Varzal did something that shocked everyone. She extended her hand to Liam. It was a gesture of peace, of respect, and of a willingness to move beyond the battle. Liam hesitated for only a moment before he reached out and grasped her hand. The crowd gasped, but Liam barely noticed. He was too focused on the moment. This wasn't just a victory for humanity. This was a new beginning. You've proven something today, human, Varzal said, her voice now filled with a new sense of purpose. You've proven that the galaxy cannot be ruled by power alone. It must be ruled by understanding, by cooperation. Perhaps it is time that we put aside our differences and see what we can achieve together. Liam's heart surged. This was what he had hoped for. A new path, a new way forward, not just for humanity, but for the entire galaxy. The war between species, the endless fighting, it didn't have to be the future. Perhaps, just perhaps, they could find a way to work together, to build something greater than themselves. You're right, Liam said. We don't have to fight forever. We can build something better. But it won't be easy. There will always be those who want to fight. But if we stand together, we can overcome them. Varzal nodded. Then let this be the beginning of a new alliance. An alliance between our people. Together we can build a future that no one thought possible. The crowd, still in shock, began to cheer again. But this time it wasn't just for the victory in the arena. It was for the possibility of something greater, the possibility of change. Liam and Varzal stood together, facing the crowd, their hands still clasped in a gesture of unity. The Zorathians, once so proud and sure of their superiority, now stood beside the humans, recognizing that there was more to the galaxy than strength alone. The humans, once dismissed as weak and insignificant, now had a chance to show that they could be just as powerful in their own way. The battle was over, but the real work was just beginning. Humanity and the Zorathians, once bitter enemies, had found common ground. And now, the galaxy had to decide what it would be. Would it remain divided by war and hatred, or would it embrace the possibility of peace, of cooperation, of a shared future? Liam glanced at Varzal, who met his gaze with a solemn nod. They had come a long way from their first encounter, from the initial challenge, from the belief that one had to conquer the other. But in the end, they had both learned something valuable. That strength alone was not enough to shape the future. It was understanding, cooperation, and the willingness to change that would truly make the difference. As the cheers of the crowd grew louder, Liam realized that this wasn't just the end of the duel. It was the beginning of something new, something far more important than he had ever imagined. And together, with Varzal by his side, he was ready to face whatever the future held.